Hey guys, it's Dave. Not so happy Monday today, but before we all start panicking, I've brought in an expert to give us a few words on some emotional intelligence. Let's take a look at what they have to say.
So, Professor, would you say it's time for everyone to panic?
Yes, I would, Ken.
Professor, without knowing precisely what the danger is, would you say it's time for our viewers to crack each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside?
Yes, I would, Ken.
Okay, so clearly it's time to start panicking and eat people's brains. But anyway, getting serious for a minute, obviously a bit of a rough day in the market today, not only for Rocket Lab, but for the entire market. There's a big reaction. It seems like it's to the attack from Iran on Israel, and the whole market is down, Rocket Lab included. What does this mean for Rocket Lab as we break through previous support levels? What does this mean for the overall stock market? What am I doing? Let's talk about all that. Just quickly first though, if you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, please do consider doing that. It helps out so much with the continued growth of the channel, and if you're not new here, those likes always help out with the algorithms as well. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive into the Red Monday here and Rocket Lab's stock price. So first off, as I did mention previously, the stock market seems to be moving on the news with this Iran attack against Israel. Some people calling it a prelude to World War III. Personally, I think that's extremely overblown and very unlikely to happen. But there's no denying that it is a big event and it has really moved the stock markets. Taking a look at the overall markets now, we can see that, yes, indeed, it was a big red day. This screenshot showing the NASDAQ down 1.7%, which is big, but not massive. Yeah, the overall market definitely taking a tumble today for sure. And if you're feeling down and you want to see some losses from someone else to cheer you up, this is my return on the day for my overall main portfolio. Yeah, that's a real chunk of change right there. And every time you see numbers like that in a single day, it doesn't really get that much easier, but I've definitely grown accustomed to having up days and down days like this, and it really comes with the territory as you start to grow your portfolio. So I'm by no means sitting here freaking out or stressing out despite what the intro may have said. Anyway, I thought it'd be interesting to compare Rocket Lab with some other space companies, see if it's really just them moving down today or if it's just the broad sector. And Rocket Lab's move is not really out of line with a lot of these others. Now, this is kind of a space index I was starting. I wanted to follow companies in the space industry that I consider more investable. So I don't have a company like a Virgin Galactic in here, which I would not invest in and don't really consider a safe investment. That one's actually down pretty big today as well. I think it was something like 9%, so even more than Rocket Lab. But we have Planet Labs down over 9%, Spire 5.3%, Rocket Lab 5.3, Redwire 4.6, and there's some in the 3s and 2s, and MDA, much more stable company, which is why I've recommended it if you're more risk averse. But Rocket Lab really in the same ballpark as all these other ones and not getting hit more than anyone else. But this really just goes back to what I have been worried about for the past few weeks is if we look at the overall markets, right? Rocket Lab has had what I consider to be a major hangover ever since that capital raise. And even, you know, there's other issues as well, but the stock has had a rough time basically since the start of 2024, and it's been very close to all-time lows. Now, stocks often move in tandem with the overall markets, but meanwhile, while this is happening, we have the NASDAQ on the right. Now, maybe the NASDAQ isn't the best analogy for Rocket Lab, but I'm just using it as a proxy for the overall stock markets. That still, as you can see, performed quite well and very, very high despite a bit of a sell-off lately. So what happens when you have a Rocket Lab that's already near all-time lows and a NASDAQ near all-time highs, and the NASDAQ drops? That's what I've been concerned about, and I think we kind of found that out today, is Rocket Lab will drop as well on no news about the company itself, just kind of following the overall stock market. And since it was already in a rough place, we're now looking at all-time lows, something that can definitely be pretty rough for shareholders, especially if it is a large position in your portfolio. Zooming out even further, talking a little bit about the technicals, the red line here is roughly where I considered the technical support level to be for Rocket Lab, and I have to admit here I was wrong. Here you go, write down the date. Dave was wrong, and yes, it happens, and it will continue to happen, and it does happen to anyone who invests in the stock market. So, I mean, I'm not ashamed about it or anything, but I was definitely wrong on this one. I didn't think Rocket Lab was going to break through this support level, which I thought was very strong and has really existed for about 2 years, and we did. So from a technicals point of view, not too sure what this means. We'll have to see how the stock plays out. It could imply some further moves downward. Yeah, kind of all bets are off right now, but I think a lot of it is going to have to do with the overall stock markets, which, by the way, the hot CPI numbers just recently did not help out either for the overall markets or for Rocket Lab. So that's kind of my thoughts about the stock movement. Disappointing to me. I didn't see it coming. So yeah, I was wrong. I guess Scott was right because he thought we might see new all-time lows. And luckily, I'm not super stressed out. I am just kind of holding long term. I've built out my position at a price that I consider fair or more than fair, so not really stressed out about the downward move. And now the next question most people will ask is, if you think the price you bought it at is fair and now it's even cheaper, are you adding more? And this is where your own risk tolerance and portfolio construction really comes into play here. Everyone has to decide, how concentrated they're willing to be in a single company, a single stock, regardless of how, convicted in it they may be. And I have some kind of calculus to do here, but before we get into that, we also have a lot of questions lately in the comments asking about my Rocket Lab put option and how I'm dealing with that. And that will play into my decision about whether I want to add more shares of Rocket Lab here as well. So let's take a look at what's happening with my Rocket Lab put option. If you're not too familiar with it, basically back before we had this downturn, I think Rocket Lab was sitting around $4 per share, maybe $4.05 or so a while back. I sold a put option, which basically means I'm agreeing to buy it for $4 per share on April 19th. And for that, I received over here 23 cents per share, 40 contracts. So in layman's terms, I received $953 for agreeing to buy Rocket Lab for $4 per share on April 19th. Clearly, now we're well below that, and it's looking more and more likely that the stock will remain below that by April 19th. So the question becomes, what am I going to do about this? Am I just going to pay the price of $377 per share, buy that extra $16,000 of stock, and just hold it? I can do that, and in order to do that, I'm going to probably have to sell other stocks to cover the difference. That's option number one. So option number two is to roll over the contract to a further out expiry date and hope that the stock bounces back to $4 or above by that point and just continue rolling. And sometimes you can even get paid to roll out further if the negative sentiment is that strong. You can actually make money on this, funny enough. Option number three, get assigned the shares on margin, pay an interest rate of 6.8% annually on that money you're borrowing from your brokerage, and deal with it by perhaps selling covered calls or just holding and paying that fee until you get back to $4. So those are the three options available to me. Let's break down the math a little bit to try and decide what I want to do. Option number one, well, I need to come up with $16,000 cash. So what I would have to do is probably sell some Google, which I have about $12,400. I have about $1,700 of Apple. And then I would need to supplement that by selling probably a few index funds or maybe something else. I could sell Nvidia if I wanted to. That's also another option. But yeah, so that's kind of what I would have to sell. There's some other options in my portfolio. I could sell all index funds if I wanted, but I don't really like touching my index funds. I like having that safe half of my portfolio. Feel free to call me a wimp and someone without conviction if you want, but I've just always had, a good half or so in index funds, and it really helps anyone sleep easier at night as you go through these volatile times like today. So that's option number one, sell those, buy the stock, and just hold it long. Not a bad option, really, if I think 377 is a great price. I can do it. It's a solid option. Let's look at option number two. So it may look complicated here. It's a screenshot from my brokerage. It is rolling the option to a new end date. So right now I have to buy on April 19th. I can buy back this option and then sell a new option with the same strike price for May 3rd, give myself a bit more time. Now, the bid and ask on this is, the bid is negative 15 cents, the ask is positive 5 cents. So I did throw in an order here of in the middle ground, which is negative 7 cents, to see if that triggers. It hasn't yet, but there is a chance it will trigger before the expiry date. If that does happen, I actually get paid another $280. That's what the C is. It stands for credit. I get paid $280 in order to go to that new end date. For me, that is really the ideal scenario. Yes, I will take extra money. I think it's only a matter of time personally before Rocket Lab is back above $4 per share. Might be a while, might be soon, hard to say, but if I get paid to hold that in the interim, and I'm not paying interest on, owning a stock on margin, to me, this is a good option. But let's look at option number 3 as well. So, as I said previously, we're looking at a 6.8% interest rate on the $16,000 loan from my broker. That equates to $1,088 per year to basically cover the cost of me buying this Rocket Lab shares. Now, if you think about dividing that up by 12 to get a monthly number, we're talking about $90.66 per month. So, hypothetically, let's say I get assigned these shares. I'm paying my brokerage interest because I'm borrowing money to buy these shares. I could sell covered calls, which is the exact opposite, agreeing to sell people my shares for $4 at, say, a month out and see how much money that would make me. Basically, what I'm looking at here is the expiry date of May 17th, agreeing to sell it for $4 per share on that date. And the bid and ask is between 15 and 20. So likely I could get, I could get for sure probably at least 15 today, perhaps somewhere between 15 and 20, and that number could vary. So I picked the middle, let's say 17 cents for each one. Doing the math on those 4,000 shares, that means I would get $680 selling this option, which is the exact same that I got assigned it. So, if it does get triggered, I end up with profit. I'm not losing anything. If you subtract out the monthly interest I'm paying, 680 minus 9066 means that is $589 I'm making in profit, and it buying me time to get back to $4, in which case, I keep all the premiums and don't lose anything on it. However, you definitely want to keep in mind the major risks when you do this, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart, definitely not something I'm advising everyone to go and do, because if Rocket Lab starts dropping lower, that means this amount of premium I get drops lower and lower as well. So if, let's say, Rocket Lab drops into the 2s somehow, I'm not saying anything's impossible at this point. Let's say Rocket Lab drops into the 2s. I'm probably looking at like hardly anything on premiums for a $4 call option only a month out, which means I'm stuck holding these shares at a big loss. Plus, I'm now paying my broker $680 a month to, cover that to allow me to own these shares. That is really a worst case nightmare scenario and something everyone should keep in mind when they consider doing something like this. So if you go with this option, you better be extremely confident that the stock isn't going to drop too much lower, and you better be prepared for that eventuality. Of course, if that did happen, I could at that point sell like a Google or some of those other companies to cover the broker and remove that margin loan. So this is also a decent option for me in my scenario, because I would always be able to sell something else, something very steady that's unlikely to drop massively, because I do have those index funds or some other companies, and it is a profitable trade for now. So those are my 3 options. None of them are very bad. I'm kind of leaning towards option number 2, because then I'm not paying any interest, a little bit less risk, but option number 3 is all right as well, as long as Rocket Lab, again, doesn't drop massively, which, since it's broken through that support, I can't say for sure it won't happen over the short term, and that could be quite a wild donkey ride, as Peter Beck likes to say. Let me know what you think I should do in the comments below. Always interested to hear. Before we wrap this up, though, there is actually a recent article that came out with Peter Beck talking about SpaceX. I figured I might as well share it now since we're talking Rocket Lab and the stock. Seems like I'm not the only one in a bad mood today. Peter seems a little irked as well. So let's go into that. So here we are with the Washington Post. This article just came out today, and I thought it was pretty interesting, talking about how SpaceX may be stifling competition. Some interesting quotes here. They're talking about not just Rocket Lab, but Blue Origin, Firefly, and some other companies. But talking about Peter Beck, some interesting quotes. He does say, without SpaceX, I don't think Rocket Lab would exist, to be honest with you, because they blazed the path that said space can be commercial and space is investable. So, definitely giving props there and not really complaining, and I think that is really good to hear and a good attitude to take. But he did say you don't have to look far for examples of behaviors that are clearly designed to stifle competition. There's nothing the matter with pushing hard to create barriers for others to enter, but no monopoly in history ever survives. I think the US government recognizes that along with the industry. So yeah, I think he's quite unhappy with the new bandwagon rideshare pricing that SpaceX has come out with. We did talk about it several times recently, and it looks like Hawkeye 360, some launches that were going to go on Electron will be going towards the bandwagon, and it's just a difficult business practice. SpaceX can really afford to charge whatever they want. They could even launch these missions at a loss if they wanted to. It's a drop in the bucket for them, but it could prevent, potential competition down the line from getting a runway to actually lifting off, if you will. Beck does clarify, though, saying let me be super clear, we're not complaining. We like competition, so all of this is good. He also did mention that his acquisition of Twitter and some of the topics he does discuss at length on there could be considered a potential weakness because, it makes investors uncomfortable. And, it definitely, as someone who's invested in Tesla, sometimes I just wish he wouldn't go to the places he goes. That's for sure. Something Peter definitely doesn't do. He just sticks to the facts. Peter does say, I much prefer to just let the engineering and the execution do the talking. And SpaceX has declined to comment on the article. The recent SpaceX rideshare mission, known as Bandwagon, raised concerns among many in the industry that because the price was extremely low, according to industry officials who saw it as a tactic to take business from competitors. Competing is one thing, but predatory is another, one industry executive said. Some companies have even complained about the mission to the Pentagon because there was no business reason to fly the mission at that cost, according to the executive who spoke on the condition of anonymity. So, who knows who that is. But it does seem like SpaceX may be taking some steps to stifle incoming competition from new rocket companies. So yeah, that article, not really super pertinent to what the discussion we're having today, but I did just find it interesting and just see it, so I decided to tack it on at the end. Ultimately, I'm not stressing out right now. As I said in a tweet, what I like to do at times like this is just go outside, enjoy the fresh air, enjoy the sunshine, and think about, the priceless things. And not everything is money. Obviously, I won't say money doesn't matter, but there's plenty of priceless things that you can enjoy either way. And just don't focus so much on the stock price. I know that can be hard if you do have a large position in the company. For me, though, I'm completely fine. I do think I have a fair price for my shares, and I'm willing to wait it out. As to the question of did I buy more stock today, the answer is no, and believe me, I wanted to, but having this put on my books, I just didn't feel like it was responsible for me to add even more shares, selling even more other companies. Ultimately, I'm already beyond the share count I originally planned to be at. Everyone has to decide for themselves how much diversification they want. And I do like having those index funds and that safer side of my portfolio, and seeing dividends come in every month or every year definitely helps out as well. I do feel like I've added enough shares where if Rocket Lab goes where I think it will go, I will significantly benefit, and it will be a life-changing event. Not enough to retire, but definitely a life-changing event, so I'm satisfied with the amount of shares I've added. Maybe in the future, I wouldn't rule out adding more shares as my circumstances dictate, but ultimately I do have other expenses in my life coming up. So yeah, gotta plan for those as well. Let me know what you did today, how you're feeling. Hope you're not too down about the new all-time lows. As I like to say, just get out, get some fresh air. Don't focus so much on it. The stock market does tend to fluctuate. Things go up and down, and the world is not ending. I hope you guys do have a great week. Get out and enjoy the sunshine. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.